Good afternoon. Hope you're all doing well, and hope you had a very nice lunch, and that after good, first of all, this morning spiritual food, then physical food, now it's a perfect time to again come here and have some very good mental as well as spiritual food. So this afternoon we are in the topic about the influence of social media and the use of smartphones on brain development. And I'm again so happy and glad that Dr. Nedley is with us this afternoon, one of the best brain biochemistry experts who is going to help us better understand the influence of social media on brain development. So again, I want to greet him in a special way, if may, and to give him the platform. So please, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Pastor Ivan. I think this is our last formal presentation in Ireland, and we've enjoyed being here a number of days, and we certainly wish you all the best of health of body, mind, and soul, and hopefully this will introduce you to actually getting more deeply involved in helping other individuals as well as ourselves to obtain optimal brain health. Well, a number of years ago, it's actually, this research goes back to the 1970s, we began to realize that entertainment television was not all good. In fact, not only was it not all good, but evidence was showing that when you, and this is just through an EEG, when you actually put electroencephalogram on your brain as you're watching your favorite television program, within 3 minutes, most people within 90 seconds, their beta wave activity goes away. Beta wave is when your frontal lobe is involved, when you're analyzing the information, when you're engaging, when you're digesting that. The beta wave activity goes away, and now you're in alpha wave. Alpha wave, your emotions can still work. You can also laugh or cry with the scene. Your memory is still working, so that if you see this as a rerun 8 years later, your brain will say, I've seen this before, but you're no longer putting it in the appropriate subsets. And this is why entertainment television has been shown to have 17 different areas that it detracts from the frontal lobe, no matter what type of programming it is. Now, of course, we know there can be worse programming than others, by far. But a lot of people get this idea that if we just have, healthy entertainment television, I haven't seen the series, but I've heard some people remark about it. The series that's kind of Hollywood-based on the life of Christ. I'm sure that's made it to Ireland. I think there's some Catholics and Mormons that came together to put that together. What's the name of the series? Chosen. Okay. So I haven't seen The Chosen, but I can tell you this. You'll be able to tell within 1 minute of watching The Chosen whether it's healthy for your brain or whether it's not healthy for your brain. How would you be able to tell? That's right. It's the scene of reference change. In entertainment television, the average scene of reference changes every 3 seconds. And what happens is the frontal lobe can't take that all in. The frontal lobe is the analysis portion of our brain. Sometimes it's a simple scene. You'll see someone walking up to a door, and you see a camera angle of the person walking. Then you see another camera angle of the hand knocking the door. Then you see the person on the other end of the door coming towards the door. All of this camera jumping is going all over the place. Even if you were at that scene, you couldn't jump around at all those different angles. Why do they do that? They do that to keep you focused. So one of the things that has to happen for hypnosis to occur is your eyes have to be still and focused, and there has to be a flickering light. And this flickering happens as a result of the rapid scene of reference change. Now, you can watch, as a physician, sometimes I'm working in critical care and I'm waiting for the nurses to get ready for a procedure for me to do critical care, and so I'll be down in the doctor's lounge. And physicians tend not to watch Hollywood movies. They don't watch those sorts of things. They may watch sports. They may watch news items. But they'll often be watching something where it's just one camera view for like 60 minutes. What is it going to be? It'll be something like C-SPAN, where a senator is giving a talk up there in front of the Congress or something. And you'll see something you'll never see when someone's watching entertainment television. You will see them, and they'll be talking to me, and they'll be listening to the set and all of that, but all of a sudden, they'll start to argue with the set. You will never see someone watching a Hollywood movie that stands up and starts arguing. Even though someone's giving a speech that they might totally disagree with, they're not going to do that. Why? The frontal lobe is suppressed. The frontal lobe doesn't have that moral indignation per se, even though it's something that's pretty terrible. And so they'll stand up and they'll say, "Did you hear this, Senator? He said this, he said this, he said this, but he totally neglected this, totally neglected that. This is a very extremely biased presentation," and they'll just decimate. And what does that tell us? That tells us the doctor's frontal lobe is working. He's actually being able to analyze. He's maybe learned some things, but he also realizes that this senator is out there to manipulate and is not there really to necessarily tell all of the truth. And this is an important aspect of society, is for our frontal lobes to be engaged. So this is a quote from a hypnosis textbook, actually. I'm kind of amazed that hypnosis is making a comeback in the mental health world because, I've wondered, why in the world are people turning to hypnosis for mental health when this is what even the hypnosis textbooks say that it does? Hypnosis attempts to do what? Cancel out frontal lobe functions and bring people into a what? Trance, in which they become what? Highly suggestible. Now, it is true that if you want to quit smoking, hypnosis can work about 6% of the time. Not very successful. But if it does work, everybody that gives up smoking will start another habit that's even worse than smoking. So that's, again, due to the frontal lobe suppression. We don't want to suppress people's frontal lobes to try to change their mind on something. This is why you don't even want to have subliminal messages. I remember about 25 years ago, I was speaking at a camp meeting, and there was an evangelist that was there that was utilizing, I would say, some methods that are not the best as far as enhancing the frontal lobe. What was he doing? He was actually putting 1 out of every 30 slides of his video, he was inserting a message that you couldn't see because it's 1/30th of a second and you're watching all of the video screens. But it had a little message, "Be baptized." And then there'd be a subliminal message, and it would be this or that. And I got into a discussion with him about that. I said, we shouldn't have to actually suppress frontal lobes and put something subliminal to try to get a decision. The decision should be based on the whole body, mind, and soul ready to do this. We shouldn't have to use trickery. We shouldn't have to use anything like that. We want the whole brain to be involved and the frontal lobe to be fully involved in understanding the decision that you're about ready to make. So, as far as, yes, let's see if I can read that. Hypnosis, this is again from the Hypnosis textbook. Most easily accomplished by training the eyes to focus in on one object, the best object being a little flickering light. The person will then record information and duties without interpretation or without frontal lobe activity. And so many people don't recognize that the television in their own home is a hypnotic instrument that can adversely affect their performance. Now, there's a friend of mine. I actually was just with him on the same platform a few weeks ago as they were asking us both some personal questions about our lives, which were there for a big live audience to see where we came from, et cetera. We actually we were raised within 15 miles of each other, although we didn't know each other then. He was raised in downtown Detroit. I was raised in suburban Detroit. As I mentioned last night, my father was an engineer for General Motors, designed automobiles. And he had no father. He was raised in a single-parent home. His mother refused to get on the welfare system. And so to support her two boys, she worked 3 different jobs outside the home. And one of her jobs was cleaning houses for the wealthy. And she noticed she would go outside of Detroit for that. She would go into suburban Detroit. When she cleaned homes for the wealthy, the television was not on, and the kids were reading interesting books out of the library, educational books. And these wealthy people were trying to get their kids to also be successful and wealthy. And so she just made that connection. She had a frontal lobe going, and she made that connection. And she came home and told her 2 sons, no more TV. No more entertainment television. And they kind of went ballistic. Said, Mom, in fact, do you think their affection for their mom went up or went down with that? Yeah. Sometimes when we're doing good parenting, we need to recognize that the affections for our kids, for ourselves, aren't going to necessarily be there. But she said, okay, I'll let you have the TV back once you check out 2 educational books from the Detroit Public Library and write a book report. Hand that in to me. And then I'll let you watch TV the rest of the week. So 2 book reports per week. And her kids were having trouble. Her 10-year-old had almost gone to jail. He had thrown a knife in anger at a friend of his who was bothering him, irritating him. It hit on the belt buckle and it didn't go into his belly. And he was failing, not doing well in school, and he hated poverty. He was growing up in poverty. He hated poverty. And after no television and checking out 2 books from the Detroit Public Library, he went from the bottom of the class to the top of the class. And he noticed he was able to handle his emotions. And he said, even though I was in poverty, my hatred for poverty went away. The moderator asked when we were on the same platform, why do you think your hatred for poverty went away when you were still poor? He says, because I realized it was going to be temporary. Then he got admitted to the University of Michigan, became a physician, then went to Yale and became a neurosurgeon. Then he became a pediatric neurosurgeon. By the way, the other thing he changed at that time of his life was his choice of music. He decided to listen to frontal lobe enhancing music. Now, I'm talking more about technology, but what's the difference? This has actually been shown by science as well. We'll see the beta waves go away with this type of music as well after 90 seconds to 3 minutes. It's called the syncopated rhythm. Syncopated rhythm won't get you the first measure. It won't get you the second measure. It won't get you the third. But when it's continual syncopation, the frontal lobe goes down. And this music is characterized normally by having a trap drum set. That's the reason for it, where you do boom cha, boom cha, boom cha. It's not just 3 boom chas. It's boom cha all the way through. And it's going on for minutes. And he stopped that music and he started listening to music that had straight rhythms instead of syncopated rhythms, that had beautiful melodies and harmonies. And then he began to do things that no one else thought possible. No one thought Siamese twins could ever be separated from the brain level. And he started to separate Siamese twins from the brain level, and this is all timed with anesthesia. And how did he time it? He timed it to his classical music to know when to phase from one part of the surgery to another. 32 different aspects for this surgery. You might have heard of him. He has a book that's well worth reading called Gifted Hands by Ben Carson. And he says, I never, ever would have done this had my mom not taken away entertainment television from me. Now, what he didn't even realize until later, his mom actually did not know how to read. She would mark up his papers with red ink and stuff. She knew a little bit enough to be able to mark it up, but she wanted them to know that she was looking at those papers. She was investing in the success of her boys, and he can't say enough about them. So what I'm revealing in regards to science and television has already been somewhat revealed. In fact, even Bill Clinton was put into office. You have to have a number of support groups to put you in office as President of the United States, normally. Trump has kind of defied that. No newspaper ever endorsed Donald Trump. No media organization ever endorsed Donald Trump. And Hollywood, of course, did not endorse him at all or anything like that. So Trump has kind of defied that. But prior to Trump, you had to have a number of groups support you to get into office. And one group that was strongly supportive of Clinton and normally supportive of the more progressive party was the Hollywood elite. And they felt betrayed after Bill Clinton came out and gave speeches against entertainment television and entertainment movies because of the science was showing it. So Clinton was going with the science and saying, we need to have America be more educated. They're being manipulated with their lack of frontal lobe. So what does it do? It increases daydreaming. That's not a good thing. There's actually studies showing, now what is daydreaming? Daydreaming is when you go into fantasy land. You might be at the grocery store getting ready to check out, and you see People magazine that has Brad Pitt on the front of it, and the woman will then go into fantasy land. I'm going to be coming home to Brad Pitt tonight, and start going into house building and all of this kind of stuff. This is daydreaming, or it could happen to the man as well with, I don't know who to put on the front cover of People magazine that a man would go over. I'm not into the latest Hollywood people, but you name her. By the way, speaking of Hollywood, a few years ago I was in front of a famous Hollywood actor that was in first class, one seat in front of me. I was going on a speaking appointment. And I didn't know this Hollywood actor because I hadn't watched a movie in 20 years, but I could see that he was famous. People were stopping and trying to say hello, and oh, wow, see who's over here, et cetera. And the guy next to me had watched a lot more movies than I had, and he spoke up and said, I know this guy. He was in this movie, he was in that movie, he named about 4 or 5 movies, and he says, what's his name? I said, I have no idea. I haven't watched a movie in 20 years. He says, you haven't watched a movie in 20 years? I said, I figured out it's a whole lot better for me to live my life than watch someone else acting like they're living a life on a set. And he said, that's cool. I'm going to write that down. And he starts writing it down, and then the Hollywood actor stands up and looks at me and says, I don't even watch my own movies. And so there's a general consensus that this stuff is not healthy for you. I mean, he wasn't even going to watch his own movies afterwards. He's doing it for a job. But it increases daydreaming while decreasing creative ingenuity. It's going to decrease your frontal lobe ability to, what is creativity? It's actually your ability to come up with something that's completely original, but also useful for others. And creativity is one of those things that's associated with wealth, because if you come up with something that's original and helpful for others, you can put it into manufacturing, and you can go from the lowest socioeconomic status to the highest socioeconomic status. It decreases interest in reading. It decreases interest in learning. It reduces discernment. In addition to that, it trains you in non-reaction when you should be reacting. So things that you should react to, you just kind of vegetate. Don't react. But it does the opposite when you shouldn't react. When you should be managing your emotions, it actually increases aggressiveness. Now, this was shown in a couple of different, even practical trials. I don't know if you're aware of, but television did not hit South Africa till 1974. It had to do with political reasons, but there was no TV in South Africa until 1974. And when television hit South Africa, within 1 year afterwards, rates of rape, murder, violent crimes doubled. Now, it was actually predicted based on models of frontal lobe suppression. Then rural Canada did not have television till decades later due to satellite. There was no way of getting the electricity up there and doing all this stuff, so satellite brought in entertainment television in rural Canada, and those rates of crime, murder, and rape doubled as well. So what it showed is if you're on the fringe where you have tendencies to go that direction, entertainment television is actually going to double that effect. But it moves the average person to a decrease of morality and frontal lobe activity by over 8%, which will actually double the outliers on the curve. It reduces sensitivity to violence, and it's also addictive. Watching anything that suppresses your frontal lobe is going to be addictive. Studies show if you're on a steady diet of entertainment television and you immediately stop watching television, you are likely to get headaches, insomnia, your irritability is going to go up. It's like you're withdrawing from a drug. You know, we used to in our churches have 5-day plans to stop smoking. We might do better now with 5-day plans to stop watching entertainment television, to help people to be able to go through that. Because a lot of people know it's not healthy for them, but they don't necessarily know how to get away from it. This was an interesting study. The more TV adolescents watch, the more likely they are to develop attention and learning problems, do poorly in school in the long run. The amount of TV kids watched when they were 14 positively linked with having attention problems later, not doing homework, hating school, not finishing high school as well. And so 14-year-olds who added, you think, well, one more daily hour of TV is not that bad. Notice what happened by age 16, doubled their risk of academic failure. Now, as I mentioned, this is among researchers fairly well known now. Bill Clinton even made it fairly well known. And of course, at the very least, it takes away precious time for family, achievement, and spiritual pursuits. So as entertainment television goes up, our willingness for spiritual pursuits, devotion, reading, even spending time with family goes down. Now, I must admit, when the smartphone came out in 2008, I thought it would be better than entertainment television. And one of the reasons why I thought it would be better is, you kind of vegetate in front of entertainment television. You're just kind of in this hypnotic state. But with the smartphone, at least you kind of have to make a decision on what you're going to touch and what you're going to view next. So I thought, okay, the frontal lobe will have to be involved in this. But I'm not even sure the ones who came up with the smartphone recognized what it was actually going to do to the frontal lobe and why. So what we do know is our thoughts and feelings are highly influenceable. Our thoughts were previously thought to be sequestered in our skull. But we now know that they are a monitoring system and not just a thinking system. They're a what? Monitoring system. And that means the brain's attention is actually drawn toward any object that is new, intriguing, or otherwise striking. And media and communication devices, from telephones to TV sets, have always tapped into this curiosity. Technology addiction is now a real thing. It's a real diagnosis in the DSM. And technology addiction actually can be even more powerful than alcohol addiction. Now, let me just mention how powerful alcohol addiction is. If you're a flaming alcoholic, there's not an alcohol rehab center that won't tell you you're not going to have success unless you're in an inpatient rehab for more than 4 months. They're going to want you in there 5 months, even 6 months. When they send you out in 3 months, it's not long and you're back to it again. That's how addictive it is. Now, I must admit, in our program, we do treat flaming addictions, and they're not even there a month. The most severe ones, 17 or 18 days. What is the difference? We're doing things to enhance their frontal lobe. We're getting rid of the stinking thinking part. We're helping the biochemistry so that they don't have to feel this need to self-medicate with alcohol. But technology addiction can even be more addictive. It's now the #1 addiction in all the world. More people are addicted to technology than any other single substance. And that includes caffeine, which used to be the most addictive one. Anyone want to guess what % of Irish people are addicted to caffeine? Yeah. I can't tell you what it is in Ireland, but in America, it's 80%. And so we're talking in excess of 80% now addicted to technology. Psychologists specializing in addiction have called this technology addiction an impulse disorder that can be as socially damaging as alcoholism, gambling, and drug addiction. So it's not even a powerful addiction. It also has some very adverse consequences, and sometimes those consequences are even worse. So what are warning signs that you might have this addiction? Using text messages or email when face-to-face interaction would be more appropriate. Limiting times with family and friends to tend to emails or surf the internet. Foregoing meaningful activities or time outdoors because of technology use. And not keeping up at work, school, or homework because of this screen time. So those are our warning signs. But of all media devices, the smartphone stands out. Now let me tell you the data. When did depression go up exponentially? In America, it went up, it was going up steadily. I think I showed this at the hotel. In 1993, 1% of less than 25-year-old girls would self-mutilate. It was 2% in 2000, 2007, 4%. 2014, 26%. So something happened between 2007 and 2014. And we've seen mental illness skyrocket in 2012, and that's when it was widely reported, and that's when half of Americans owned a smartphone. In every country of the world, when half of the citizens own the smartphone, mental illness skyrockets greatly. And they thought, well, it's not going to happen in Kenya. Kenya, I've been to Kenya, and we've been there before smartphones. They don't have much money. Their economy's not good, but they're all happy people. They enjoy life. They've got stuff going on. They're happy people. And they're happy to learn. But I was there in 2019. I was asked to come in 2019 because of mental illness was hitting Kenya. Suicides, which were unheard of in Kenya, were now happening in accelerated rate. And the newspaper at the time that I arrived announced, shock, mental illness in Kenya linked to smartphone usage. What had happened in 2019? Half of Kenyans now owned a smartphone. And so it happens in every society. Now, the smartphone seems like something we all should have because it's so useful, right? And, it's hard. The information and entertainment-packed smartphone actually acts as a supernormal stimulus. Now, we teach about supernormal stimuli in our program, but a supernormal stimulus is really one that stimulates even more than what it was intended to do. And the smartphone can hijack attention whenever it's part of our surroundings, which, when we carry it with us, which everybody virtually does, it always is. But while phones offer convenience and diversion, they also breed anxiety. Their extraordinary usefulness gives them an unprecedented hold on our attention and a vast influence over our thinking and behavior. I remember it was right around 2012. I was speaking in another state besides California, and I was speaking with a famous evangelist who was giving some meetings there. And I had to go to a nearby state in Arizona to have my airplane worked on. And I was going to be flying over the Grand Canyon. And I invited this speaker to come with me, and he had his son with him, who was a teenager, and they had never seen the Grand Canyon before. So, one of the wonders of the world, and so I'm flying through the corridors. It's actually beautiful to see it even from the restricted flight zones that they let you go over. And we're turning, and both of us are really enjoying that in the front seat. And he looks back at his son, and his son is not looking out the window. What do you think his son was doing? Looking at his phone. And he said, "Son, look outside. This is beautiful. It's the Grand Canyon." And without even looking outside, the son still looked at his mobile phone and said, "I've already seen it." And he says, "No, son, we've never been here." "Well, I've seen it in pictures." And he continued to look at his mobile phone. So when natural things that are beautiful, we don't even want to necessarily go there. Now, I know a lot of natural sites are getting more visitors lately, but it's not because people want to see the natural sites. It's because they want a smartphone picture to load up in their Instagram with that in the background. And so that's the motivation to get the picture per se. But we need to recognize how gripping these things are. So in a recent Gallup poll, and this was almost a decade ago, more than half of smartphone owners said they couldn't imagine life without the device. Can't even imagine what life would be like. Well over half of people said that they would get highly anxious if they were not able to be in contact with their phone for just a few hours. So, but the studies are showing it's breeding anxiety, but a lot of people think that they're using it to treat their anxiety. It's kind of like the trick of alcohol. I drink alcohol so that I'm not so anxious. Well, how has that worked out for them? You know, it's, by the way, these social drinkers, I'll say this sometimes in the program. Well, you know, you go out and you have a drink and it's just, it helps you socially. If you have to suppress your frontal lobe in order to feel free socially, you have got social anxiety. You've got a mental illness, and you're treating it with social alcohol use, but you're still treating it. We should not have to suppress our frontal lobes to be genuinely social people if our brains are working healthfully. And so many people feel anxious without it. And the serious aspect is that studies are clearly showing that as we grow dependent on technology, our intellect weakens. Using a smartphone or even hearing one ring or vibrate produces what? Distractions that make it harder to concentrate on a difficult problem or job. This was a study done at University of California, San Diego, who's been researching this quite a bit. Some of the best research has come out of UCSD. 520 undergraduate students were given 2 standard tests of intellectual acuity. One test gauged available cognitive capacity, which is a measure of how fully a person's mind can focus on a particular task. This focusing aspect turns out to be a key ingredient for expanding our mind, for neuroplasticity to occur, for creativity to occur as well. The second test assessed fluid intelligence, a person's ability to interpret and solve an unfamiliar problem. Now, if you've had an IQ test, they're testing you for fluid intelligence. That's your ability to solve an unfamiliar problem. I mentioned the MCAT earlier today. The MCAT is an IQ test. Once you know the basics of science, can you solve an unfamiliar problem using the basic principles of science is what they're searching for. So that's why they always give you unfamiliar problems, not ones that you've solved before. So the only variable in this experiment was the location of the subject's smartphone. Some placed their phones in front of them on their desks. Others put their phones in their pockets or handbags. Still others left their phones in a different room altogether. You'd think, well, not much difference, but the results were striking. In both tests, the subjects whose phones were in view posted the worst scores. Those who left their phones in a different room did the best. Studies who kept their phones in their pockets or bags came out in the middle. This is what the study's authors concluded. As the phone proximity increased, brain power decreased. Nearly all the participants, however, said their phone had not been a distraction and that they hadn't even thought about the device during the experiment. They remained oblivious as the phones disrupted their thinking. Excuse me. So they're saying, this doesn't affect me at all. I don't know if you've had people say that you're overblowing. Why do you want me to not have a phone? This is not an issue. They were all saying it's not an issue, but the results showed clearly it was an issue. So we're not even cognizant of the problems that it's causing. So this is the part, thank you very much. This is the part that I didn't understand when smartphones came out. Studies show when you get on your screen to do something useful, because there are useful things that we can do on our screen. The average person is no longer doing something useful in 3 minutes. This is particularly true of young people. The young person gets on their screen. My teacher says I have to go online to do my homework. I'm doing my homework. They get on the screen, and within 3 minutes, they're no longer doing their homework. Now, was that their intention? No. They were fully intending to get their homework done. What happened? They got distracted. And it may have been something that's not necessarily bad. Engineers know that this kid is into BMWs. And so a little BMW starts floating across the screen in 3 minutes. Your new A20 is at your local BMW dealer. Oh, I knew it was coming out, but I didn't know it was coming that quick. Let me just click on that. What does that A20 have? And so the person clicks on that and starts viewing the nice features of this A20. They're going through these features. A news notification comes on. Donald Trump just got handcuffed and put in a New York City jail. Oh, I've got to see that. Let's see the picture of him being handcuffed, and let's see what the left says about it, and let's see what the right says about it. And then a friend sends a Snapchat. If you don't look at that picture, you're not going to see what your friend's doing then. And so you got to look at it now. And so then you look at that. Then another friend sends a text. Now 45 minutes have passed, and the kid is wondering, why am I on this screen? Oh yeah, my homework. That division of attention actually starts to shrink the anterior cingulate gyrus of the frontal lobe. What is the anterior cingulate gyrus? This is where your working memory is at. And by the way, working memory was sometimes stimulated in regards to learning phones. When I first became a physician, I had over 1,000 phone numbers memorized. I knew the phone number of the hospital pharmacy. I knew the phone number of every one of the wards at the hospital. I knew the phone number of ICU, of the ER, of the laboratory, of the radiology department. I knew the phone number of my uncle that lived in Pennsylvania. I knew the phone number of all of these friends. People would call me, what's the phone number for this? You could just rattle it right off. Now if you ask someone about a phone number, they might not even know their own. It's like, let me look at it here. Oh yeah, this is the number. And that focused attention aspect of things has affected us. Now, the anterior cingulate gyrus, again, it's where working memory is at. We have to learn what's in the working memory to store it in our hippocampus, which is where more of the permanent memory is at. And if we can't focus and concentrate for a full hour and really be engaged, our anterior cingulate gyrus is flawed. And what produces that flaw? Just the normal use of smartphones. The normal use of smartphones. So we'll see in the MRI will show the shrinking of the anterior cingulate gyrus. Now, why does that have to do with emotions? Because the anterior cingulate gyrus is not just working memory, it's also where we manage distressing emotions. We manage distressing emotions in our frontal lobe. And if we can't focus, we're not going to be able to manage distressing emotions. This is why ADHD always comes with emotional issues. It's not just a focus or a learning disability issue. There's emotional issues. And ADHD will happen in everybody if they use the smartphone the way the engineers want you to use it. It's actually almost totally environmental these days. Those are things that I hadn't necessarily factored in, but the studies are clearly indicating integrating smartphone usage into daily life causes a brain drain. It diminishes the vital mental skills like learning, creativity, abstract thought, logical reasoning, and problem solving. Now, just imagine that a pharmaceutical agent was released on society that was supposed to help you mentally, but these were the side effects. What would we say about that pharmaceutical company? They're unethical. They're greedy. They didn't, they should have known that these things were going to happen. And even the senators would line up against them, and there'd be lawsuits, and there'd be all of these sorts of things. But when it happens to technology, we just shrug our shoulders. And no one is paying for this. The technology companies are still scot-free. Now, the technology companies have caught up a little bit because there's been a little bit of anger directed at them. And so they've come out with a new device. Their new devices will actually say, you have been on your smartphone for 8 hours today. Press yes if you would like to continue. Press no if you would like it to shut down. And they know their people are addicted, and they're going to press yes. They're going to continue at that phase. And so, we're talking about hours being wasted. Our attachment to our phones has grown so intense, their mere presence diminishes intelligence. This is a phrase from University of California, San Diego. Diminished ability to manage distressing emotions and stay focused. University of Researchers at Sussex, which is right close by here in the UK, compared the amount of people spend on multiple devices to MRI scans of their brains. These device users had less brain density in the anterior cingulate cortex, a region of the frontal lobe responsible for empathy, as well as cognitive and emotional control. If you've noticed empathy is an all-time low, this is part of the reason. Lack of focus also disrupts your ability to learn well. So the new phrase that's being created is digital dementia. High-speed media content contributes to attention deficit disorder, decreases concentration and memory, and when the brain doesn't have to focus. Here's what the studies are showing. If you have no phone and you don't go to college and you're out there on a farm working, you will actually have a better frontal lobe and brain than someone who went to an Ivy League school and got a degree. Why? Because you're focusing for long periods of time in doing that farming. There might be a distraction from a bee coming by, but that's not anything like the BMW coming by. You know what to do about that bee, and you go right back to work again, and it doesn't shrink the anterior cingulate gyrus down because you're able to focus for long periods of time. This is one of the reasons at Weimar University, we have our kids. We had a kid come to our school. He wanted to be a doctor. If you want to be a doctor, it's a good place to come. We had to look at our data for the accreditors. 94.6% chance you're going to go to medical school if you do your undergraduate training at Weimar University, more so than any other university. But part of the reason why we're successful is because we help mentor people that do have some learning issues. This guy had a learning issue. He came from a bad home, divided home, issues, and he also got a smartphone, was involved in this, got involved in some trouble, etc. In fact, he was actually refused admission to Weimar the first time. And then a board member who knew about his willingness to turn his life around called me. I'm not part of the admissions committee, but I had the admissions committee look at it again with this new information, and they accepted him under probation. He wanted to be a doctor. His first grade in general chemistry and biology, C. Is that going to get you into medical school? No. And of course, his teachers and others were thinking, not everyone's cut out to be a doctor. He'll be one of those 5.4% that come to Weimar that's not going to be able to do it. But he came to me and he said, I want to be able to learn. My brain just can't do it. So I told him about technology, and I told him about working with his hands in 3D. He had an indoor job, and now he had a job out on the farm, but the farmer wouldn't hire him. He was only working 6 hours a week. The farmer wouldn't hire him unless he committed to working 20 hours a week. Because the farmer wants to have good workers that are focused And he said, it's not working what I'm doing now. I'll work 20 hours a week. What do you think happened to his grades? They started to come up. He started to understand what was going on. He would ask questions. He would get engaged. But working with his hands in 3D and that focus on the farm was actually able to help him to focus. He, last year, graduated from Loma Linda University School of Medicine, did well in his MCAT, and he was honored as one of the best medical students that Weimar had in the top 5, and also a very empathetic, spiritual person. And as I looked at him, I thought it wouldn't have happened anywhere else. They would have all given up on this kid. But you know, brains can change. That's the beautiful thing. No matter how bad our brain is, it can change for the better. But of course, if we don't use it, we'll end up losing it. And much of the activity of humanity today is not stimulating the frontal lobe. So, in digital dementia, you're pruning the working memory of your brain. Connections that are functionally important are strengthened, but those that aren't not used are weakened. So if you don't have prolonged focus attention, you know that BMW kid, for instance, that I told you about, that got distracted from the BMW? There was an engineer for that A20 that gave a 60-minute talk on this new BMW, and the kid refused to look at it. Why? He didn't have focus, and he knew he didn't have focus. 60 minutes? I'm interested in an A20, but I'm not going to be able to digest everything this engineer is saying. I'll take the 2-minute version, because that's what my brain is capable of. And if you do that, you're never going to be truly successful. You've got to be able to go beyond that. By the way, if you're wanting more information on this, there's a computer programmer who's written a great book called Digital Minimalism. This computer programmer makes $1 million a year. He refuses to work over 8 hours a day, and he never had a social media account, never had a smartphone, didn't do any of that. He doesn't even advertise himself on the internet. He says, if you're very good at something, people will find you. And he learned how to be an exceptional computer programmer because he had digital minimalism. And that's the name of his book. It's called Digital Minimalism. Get the audio book if you don't think you have the focus. If you do think you have the focus, read it. But it will help you to be able to use the digital environment and technology in a smart way. So this is back to UCSD. Major longitudinal study looked at the lives of more than 1 million young people, teens who spent large amounts of time glued to phone and computer screens. Markedly more happy or less happy? Markedly less happy than those who prefer real-world activities and interactions. But you know, they don't recognize it. There's a disconnect. They think these phones are actually part of enhancing their life. The other day, I was called to an emergency room to see a 15-year-old girl who had jumped out of a moving vehicle to admit her to the critical care unit. Why had she jumped out of a moving vehicle? Her mother took away her smartphone in the middle of that drive. Her mother saw what she was doing on the smartphone, realized she was involved with the creeps of the world. By the way, when you allow your young person, full access to a smartphone, you allow them to engage with the creeps of the world. And the creeps of the world will engage in them. They'll find them, and they will start to engage in them. And the mother was appalled and said, I'm sorry, that smartphone is over with. Took the smartphone away from the 15-year-old girl, and the 15-year-old girl thought, if I can't have a smartphone, life isn't worth living anymore. So I'm just going to kill myself right here. Is that an addiction? Oh man, you bet it's an addiction. But yet, if we take, and we have to remind these kids because they'll come through our program, The first lecture we give is a lecture similar to this. It's a little different. It's geared to them. But it's a lecture similar to this because the first day that they're there, we're going to take all their devices away from them. No iPads, no computer screens, no smartphones, but we want to let them know why they're doing it. And in 10 days, these faces have lighted up. They have made some great friends. They are totally engaged. Their life has been transformed. Depression gone, anxiety gone, and we have to remind them this all happened without your smartphone. And then we have to give them a class on how to use the smartphone irregularly, not the regular use, but very irregularly. And they have to start deleting apps or having those apps completely unavailable. One of our kids, he was addicted to YouTube. He had tried to commit suicide. And a year later, we came back and interviewed him. He was doing so well. And I said, you know, you were into all this YouTube stuff, all this funny stuff. You'd just be looking at YouTube, all of that. I said, how are you handling that now? He says, well, let me show you. And he typed in YouTube on his smartphone, and it said, YouTube not available. So, I mean, he can still have his GPS on there. You know, I haven't seen people get caught in the middle of their GPS wasting hours of time. You know, it's there for a useful reason, and then you're done with it. So if you can do that, if it's something that's useful and you can get out of and not get stuck in, it's a problem. But with YouTube, as soon as you watch a video, I don't know if you've noticed, they'll show you 10 more that you might like that's similar to that. And you're into these dopamine surges, but it's actually picking off dopamine receptors. It's actually having some adverse effects on your dopamine. So social media, texting, video chatting, multi-platform video games, all associated with what? Decreased in happiness. What about actual real-world activities? Youth who invested more time in non-screen activities, playing sports, reading actual newspapers, engaging in face-to-face social interactions. Imagine that. Significantly happier. And then life satisfaction, self-worth, and happiness of young people in the U.S. particularly plummeted in 2012, the year when the proportion of Americans owning a smartphone rose above 50%. Happiest teenagers are those who use digital media less than what? 1 hour per day. After a daily hour of screen time, levels of happiness rise steadily. Now, some people say, well, I have to work with a screen. I'm one of those people. I'm a physician, and I have to type in data. I have to look at data. I have to look at scans. I have to look at all this to process the information. So what if you do have to do that? You don't have to get distracted when you're doing that. So what does that mean? You eliminate all push notifications. If Donald Trump gets handcuffed, you don't want to know about it in the middle of a patient visit. Can you imagine what that might do to my own focus and concentration as I'm looking at all of this data? It's not fair to the patient, and it's not fair to your employer. And you turn off all text message notifications, all email notifications. One of the UC system is considered a high-end educational system. There's UCSD that I've been quoting from, University of California, San Diego. There's another UC system, I won't name it, so it can't be traced. Excuse me. And this guy was the president of the UC system. And he had to quit his job because of high anxiety. And I started to get to know him. Nice guy, bright guy, did a very creative PhD. And he was well loved by his faculty and staff. And he said, one of the reasons why I got so well loved by my faculty and staff is whenever they asked me a question and they would have my mobile phone, I would try to answer it back within less than 3 minutes. So he had lots of satisfaction, but can you imagine being a president of a UC system and having that as your priority? His anxiety went through the roof, and he didn't recognize it. He was there to have me look at his brain chemistry, and the first lecture we gave in that 10-day program he was in was the technology, and he figured it out right at the end of that lecture. He said, I never should have done that. Now, as president of Weimar University, my faculty and staff would like to get answers back that quick, but they know where they can find me. And if it's that important that they need it that quick, they can actually go to where I'm at. And if they knock on the door and they're where I'm at, I will address them first before I address anything else, because I won't even see their text message. I deal with all my text messages at once. I'll knock out all my emails at once, and I might knock out my emails in the evening one day, or maybe the morning one day, and not till the evening the next. So they know I'm not going to be looking and staring at those things. But if it's important enough, they have feet. They can actually come to me, or they can actually come to someone that they know is with me at that time to tap me on the shoulder. And that way, I don't have to adversely affect my own anterior cingulate gyrus with all of these different shifting of my brain on these areas of attention. So, social media also makes us antisocial, studies have shown. Those kids are all together, but that's not face-to-face social interaction. That doesn't count. We're attracted to social media as a means of connection, but studies show, although you connect it first, virtually everyone ends up comparing far more than they connect. And they compare through a very false world. Let me give you an example. I was in the beautiful country of New Zealand, and I was in the South Island. How many of you have been to New Zealand, all the way from Ireland? Wow. I don't see a single hand go up. There's some similarities. I don't know if it's true in Ireland, but there are more sheep in New Zealand than there are people. And I know there's a lot of sheep here. I've seen them all over the place. Are there more sheep than people in Ireland? No? There's more people than sheep? Okay. But Ireland is, New Zealand is very gorgeous, and they speak English there, so you guys would be able to enter the country and enjoy it, and enjoy communing with everyone there. But in the southern part of New Zealand, there is a place called Milford Sound that many consider to be the most beautiful place on planet Earth. You're in this sound that's coming in from the ocean, so it's pretty calm water. 5,000-foot cliffs around in a rainforest, and there are waterfalls going 5,000 feet down into this fjord, and there's dolphins leaping around. And beautiful, it's just drop-dead gorgeous. So I wanted to see Milford Sound, and so we get out on a boat. Dolphins are leaping in front of us. And this waterfall is coming up, and the boat, in the front of the boat are two ladies who are arguing vehemently. My dopamine levels would have been high, but they prevented them from going high, because here they are on vacation and they're arguing with each other. So as it gets close to the waterfall, the captain starts to slow down the boat. And the ladies notice that something's about ready to happen, and then they see this waterfall behind them. And as it's slowing down and they're getting close to the waterfall, they stop arguing. They actually take out a phone. They smile real big. And they take this picture, and they instantly upload it to their Instagram account. And as soon as that's done, they resume their argument. Now, Take a look at their friends. Their friends are now seeing where they're at, and they're saying, here I am slaving away at work. And these guys are having such a good time in New Zealand. Life is not fair. But if they could have seen those girls before that picture and after the picture, they wouldn't have been a bit jealous. It's like, you're down in New Zealand and you guys can't even get along? You're arguing? Comparing ourselves on social media is a very false world. And now we have social appearance anxiety at an all-time high. Social appearance anxiety is caused by that girl who took 1,000 pictures of herself to find one that looked least like her and then uploaded that to her account. And all the other girls are jealous because there's no way they can measure up. And they don't realize that girl can't measure up either. It was all sorts of doctoring and all sorts of different lighting things and all sorts of this. And so social appearance anxiety is just the belief that you're going to be judged negatively by others just based on your appearance. And it's all due to this image side of things. I think there's a reason why there's a commandment against images. The studies show the more images you look at, the more mental illness you're going to have. So we compare ourselves via a very false world that looks true, but it's not really true. And even the Bible says comparing ourselves among ourselves is, does anyone know the rest of the phrase? Not wise. It's not wise. So screen time has been shown to significantly decrease the following: sleep, self-esteem, we've even mentioned some of the reasons why self-esteem goes down, relationships, memory, attention spans, creativity, productivity, problem solving, and decision-making skills. Now, what apps should you give up on your phone? This is University of California, San Francisco now. One of the professors there. Overstimulation eventually makes us less sensitive to dopamine, and that means we start to not enjoy the usual activities of life. So she says, how do I decide? Simply regard whether it's highly pleasurable and or problematic for you, and put a block on so you can't get to it at all. You have to put the block on because you're addicted. Don't think that you can control this in the midst of an addiction. And so something that's highly pleasurable, cut it out, she's saying. You're going to be picking off dopamine receptors. And particularly when it's highly pleasurable but totally unuseful, or if you know it's problematic, go ahead and cut it out. Our student association president a couple of years ago actually proposed to the entire student body that they could come in and they would reprogram their smartphone in regards to just this. And a whole lot of students signed up for it. And what a difference in their grades, what a difference in their soul winning, what a difference in their productivity. All of those things that I mentioned on the screen earlier, all of those things improved significantly. But it takes some intentional effort for us to do that. Time spent with media devices cannot be regained. Media devices waste a lot of time, and the research is very clear on this. Is it just minutes a day? Hours a day in a typical person. They keep us from doing healthy activities, spending time with our families, and engaging in productive work. And children, we're understanding, are learning more from their devices than from their parents, and tend to trust their devices over their parents. Now, let me tell you why that's the case. Someone might ask you, as a kid, what is the population of Ireland? You might say, I'm not sure what the population is. Siri, what's the population of Ireland? Siri will answer back and give you a number. And it's like, my smartphone knows a lot more than my parents. And so the kid later on decides to ask Siri, Siri, am I a boy or a girl? And Siri is not going to give you scientific information on that one. Siri is going to give you the programmed information. And you are whatever you think you might be. Oh, well, I think I might want to be a girl. And you can. And this is how you can be more fulfilled, etc. And so, but the kid trusts that. And then when the parent says, no, you're a boy. We know you're a boy. Everything about you is boy. The boy's thinking, my parents are dumb. They don't realize I'm actually a girl. I'm actually a girl. And they just don't know it. I need to kind of get away from them so I can go to the right surgeons and the right hormone specialists and turn me into what I want to be. And so we're seeing a rampant aspect of this gender dysphoria that has picked up. And it's just simply due to the fact that they're trusting the technology wizards that don't always have your best in mind. So children may learn more from their devices than their parents. And when parents use devices themselves when they're around their children, when it would be best to parent their children, children will actually be hooked to their devices even more so than the parents. So this is something that we can model in front of our children is device-free living. Allowing kids free access to smartphones, as I mentioned, also gives them access to the creeps of the world. Daniel Goleman, he's coined the phrase emotional intelligence, but he's also talked about how to get our brains to optimize. He makes it very clear. One of the keys to success is a digital Sabbath. Does it say once a week? You'd think a digital Sabbath means once a week. But he says a digital Sabbath, how often? Every day. What does he call a digital Sabbath? A time when adults and kids are not distracted by devices at all. You want to have a good social environment and a social occasion? I know our program director at Depression and Anxiety Recovery, we have staff get-togethers and we have enjoyable times together, but she will have the bucket for all the devices to go into as you come to that social event, and then she'll make it clear the first one that gets their device out of there washes the dishes afterwards. And we have great times without those devices. During that time, engage in focused learning or healthy activity where it's digital free, not just for a few minutes, but it really should be hours a day. Victoria Dunkley, she's a child and adolescent psychiatrist from LA. She will not diagnose any mental health problems in any child or adolescent until they've given up devices and screens for 6 weeks. And they'll say, how can I go to school without that? And she'll write a little disability. This child is disabled and cannot learn from screens. You've got to use regular printed books, regular paper, regular whatever. And because of the American Disabilities Act, those teachers have to do that. And so, EFAST, 6 weeks. She sees them again. Over half of those kids have no mental illness at all. It's all gone as a result of the electronic fast. Their focus has gone up. Their learning has gone up. Their emotions are more stable. They're not having meltdowns anymore. The less than half that still need her help, she'll then focus in on that. So 6 weeks, no screen time. There's a lot of benefits that start occurring. And then, long term, it's amazing. The academic potential goes up. I'm hoping that there's another Ben Carson getting ready to happen that's in this room that's going to completely change the way Ben Carson did. They might need some accountability from parents to help them along that line. But the brains in this room are capable of a lot if we allow the brain to be optimized with good focused attention. So, and then once they do get their devices back, turning off the notifications and only deciding ahead of time what you're going to accomplish on your device and then get off of it. You know, have the goal, this is what I'm going to do, and now I'm going off, and I will go into real face-to-face and real interactions. A lot of young people think if their phone is given away like this 15-year-old, if I don't have this phone, I'm just going to sit in my room with four walls and do nothing and be bored out of my gourd. They don't realize that's not going to happen. If someone gets bored, boredom was actually a good thing when I grew up, because if you got bored, you started to think about things that you could do that might be healthy and enjoyable. And you started to come up with all sorts of other things. And pretty soon you're having a lot more fun than anyone's going to have by staring at their device or looking at social media or comparing themselves among themselves. And so when we don't have those devices, we're going to be enhanced. Well, any questions? Yes. Oh, are we going to have a roving microphone? Yes, Ivan has it, and media is ready.
Now, in relation to hypnosis you were talking about, would you have anything to say regarding those apps for helping people to sleep, like Calm, and some of those that people can fall asleep? They put on their earphones and they listen to that.
So there may be certain types of music. You know, there's a lullaby. We have an actual CD. By the way, if you want to hear frontal lobe enhancing music and you're on Spotify, just look up Nedley Radio. We have all of the frontal lobe enhancing. But there's a section there called lullaby. A lullaby is where you have it's a straight rhythm, but it's a beat every 60 seconds that will turn into a lullaby. By the way, a lullaby that you might be familiar with, and unfortunately this is almost always sung right before the pastor gets up to speak. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. That's actually a lullaby. And so that'll start to shut down your entire brain right as the pastor gets up to speak. But it is good to listen to before you go to sleep. So if they're playing lullabies or something like that where you're not looking at a screen, you actually don't want to look at any screens an hour before going to bed. I think I mentioned that earlier, but the blue from those screens, it will detract from your melatonin output. But to listen to something or to have it programmed in, or even have an old CD player, which might be better to play lullabies, might be able to help initiate sleep in some people that are having issues going to sleep. Yes, any other questions? All right, I guess, yes.
Some of us work with screens. So, like, we have to work with screen or computers. So, what suggestion would you give for people who have to work with system like?
Yeah, so if you have to work with screens, once again, you don't want to allow yourself to get distracted. Excuse me. Don't allow push notifications to come in. Don't allow text message notifications or email notifications. We have to turn all those notifications off. By the way, on today's apps, if you log into anything on the internet and you get to an interesting app, the first thing they're going to ask you is, allow notifications from this. Do not say yes. Always say no. Do not allow them to interrupt your day with those types of things. It's to their advantage. It's not to your advantage. And then in regards to the healthiest activity, it's really talking about non-work, non-school time being less than an hour a day. And so, but most people that I've noticed use screens for work, you know, if they have a sound mind, they're not even going to be tempted to use screens outside of work, because it's like, I've been in front of this screen all the time. I need real activities. And so hopefully you're just utilizing it for work. But just don't allow yourself to get distracted. It's the distractibility element that's affecting our frontal lobe.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to say thank you. A lot of what you've taught us today has really challenged us to be a better people, to be for a better community, to be a better society. But I just wanted to say a lot of parents I've seen in church, when their babies are crying or when their children are crying, they often give them cell phones to quiet them up. I mean, what can be done in such situations?
Yeah, it's a very common babysitter, but it's a babysitter that parents end up regretting greatly, because then once their kids actually have more self-determination and the complications of all that start to be manifest, it's really hard at that point to get them away even more. So we do have to be intentional. I know my son and daughter-in-law, they have 3 daughters under the age of 4, and they're very intentional. No screens on those girls. Those girls do all sorts of interesting things, but they do not have screens at all. And the studies are showing you really probably should be screen-free until about the age of 12, and then you have to be taught how to use screens and have it be restrictive in order to develop the greatest brain possible. And so there's no reason why we need to be giving screens. I know it's easy at the time, but self-sacrificial parenting is harder in a face-to-face realm, but it's far more rewarding. Yes.
I was just going to ask you if you're familiar with Dr. Cruz. He's an American brain surgeon, and he's studied specifically the blue light that's used in phones and screens, and it's targeted at blue for a reason, because the blue affects, I think it's the frontal lobe he mentioned as well, but specifically blue light in computers and phones that a lot of his work is focused on. And he was talking about using filters to even take that.
Yes, no, the blue light is damaging. The first hour of the day, it's not very damaging, and earlier in the day. But it is damaging later in the day, and this is why you can even buy blue light filtering glasses now. You can program your device to no longer put out any blue after a certain time in the evening. And I would encourage you, if you do have to use a device at night, make sure it's blue free. And that will be more helpful, but it's actually better not to use any device before going to bed.
How do video games influence the brain?
So video games, we mentioned that. Multi-platform video games actually are associated with less happiness overall. This, of course, is producing these dopamine surges, when you, start to shoot down your opponent on the screen and see the points riling up. Those are all dopamine hits. Even these likes and dislikes. The young people will do things in order to try to get likes, and every time they get a like, there's a little bit of a dopamine surge that occurs. And if they get a dislike, then they get very angry and kind of upset. Who would actually dislike me on this and that? And so their emotions are all being gauged in regards to this kind of false world that they're living in. But the video games are often big dopamine surge activity things, and they're going to take away our enjoyment to the usual activities of life. Usual activities of life actually should be enjoyable. How much better would life be when those things are very enjoyable? Just interacting, taking a walk out in nature, having a good discussion with your friend, reading interesting material. Those things don't produce dopamine surges, but they produce a gradual dopamine increase, and that dopamine will last long after the activity is over with. So healthy dopamine activity, in fact, I should have made a difference, healthy dopamine activity will stay up long after the activity. So both groups are getting their dopamine, but the group that's getting the dopamine far above neutral the vast majority of the day are those that are not doing dopamine surge activities, like video games YouTube videos that make you laugh or whatever. They're not doing those things. Their dopamine levels are above average the vast majority of the day. The ones doing those things, their dopamine levels are below average the vast majority of the day. They did it at first to get high, but pretty soon they're doing it just to get numb because their dopamine set points have been set down because they've picked off their dopamine receptors using all this dopamine surge activity. All right, any other questions?
Okay, thank you so much for sharing and your message, and it's really important, all the information that you've shared, and I'm definitely gonna make the most of it. But I just have a question. So social media is something that that we're using now to reach the gospel. So what do you have any advice in terms of that? Because that's something that I was thinking, okay, maybe it'd be good to start a social media account where you're sharing something. But I was thinking to myself, I know that I get really distracted, so I was I just avoided using it. I was just I don't know if that's something I can really do. So I was just wondering if you have any advice on that. Maybe something that came to mind was maybe it was a team thing where you're kind of working alongside people and you're producing posts. Then it's not just you as an individual looking for likes or comments or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And actually, we use social media for people to be aware of our mental health services. Why? Because mentally ill people are on social media. You've got to know where they're at. And when do we advertise our residential program? It's late at night. It's when I'm not even up. Midnight. That's when the mentally ill people are out there on their screens and on the internet and things like that. So, and often they think they're interacting with me. This is the Nedley Instagram account. I mentioned our Nedley Instagram. We come up with a new 1-minute short video every day that is of only one view per se, but it is an update in the scientific literature that someone could grab onto to engage in and help their mental health. So we have things like that, but I don't even know how to get on Instagram. I don't know how to get on Facebook. I don't know how to get on any of those things. And sometimes someone will say, well, you need to go on Facebook, and I'll have to say, got to send it to me some other way. I don't even know how to get on those things. So, in other words, we pay people. We have to pay people to get on because I'm not going to get on there myself. But I will have that available to market to groups of people. It's still a pretty good way of telling the world who is hooked to these devices about other things that they might want to utilize to get themselves unhooked, per se. All right, any other questions?
Doctor, could you please just clarify a bit about the light therapy in the mornings and the difference between the blue light, how destructive it could be during the later part of the day, and how we can beneficially use the light therapy early in the mornings?
Yes, so the blue light therapy, which is the frequency of the blue sky, it's about 460 nanometer wavelength. When we view that in the morning, it sets our circadian rhythm clock. And we have a body clock that is actually very important for mental health. And when we set that clock, that's going to be the time when we get up in the morning. That's going to be time when we have energy. We're making serotonin as well. So there's several beneficial aspects. And then studies show, it hasn't been tried for less than this in this particular study, but it also helps our hormones. When we're viewing blue sky light for an hour a day in the morning, we increase testosterone in males. We can double the testosterone level, and we also increase female hormones because it stimulates luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone in the brain actually tells our testicles to produce testosterone, and it tells the ovaries to produce better estrogen and progesterone and those sorts of things. So it can help us hormonally as well. And so this is why we're very specific for those who have a circadian rhythm hit, which about 90% of our patients that come to our program do. we're going to utilize that light therapy. And in 7 days after they utilize it, at the same time every day, their circadian rhythm shifts to that, and some very positive things start to happen. That blue light will actually double their melatonin output at night, even though they're not looking at blue in the night. Now, if they look at blue in the night, it decreases melatonin levels, but that increased serotonin in the daytime allows more serotonin to be turned into melatonin at night, so you end up sleeping better as well. And this time of year, you can actually get blue sky maybe a third of the days here in Ireland. Why do I say a third? I saw, well, it might be more than that. I saw the other day that in Ireland, 1 out of 3 hours, there is rain. And so that means 2 out of 3 hours, there's no rain. And so that means 2 out of 3 days, there shouldn't be rain in the morning, and I'm guessing that maybe half of those days you don't even have a cloud between you and the sun. And so you could do that in the summertime, early in the morning. But since it's not consistent, it might be worthwhile to actually get blue light boxes and get our blue light glasses and things like that to be able to have that very consistent circadian rhythm. All right, maybe another question? All right, this will be the last one I'm heard.
When you were mentioning books, I want to ask you, is there a difference in our brain and with our focus when we read books online and books like physical copy of the book?
Yes. Yeah, reading books via screen or online versus a physical copy. Yeah, that's been looked at. There's been a nice crossover trial, but it was looked at in the evening. The one trial I'll tell you, and then I'll tell you about some other trials that weren't done in the evening. If you read an online book in the evening, it'll take you longer to fall asleep, and you'll make less melatonin, and you'll want to get up later the next morning. So it shifts your circadian rhythm to be later. And this is why people feel so tired in the morning as well, as often it's because they've been using a screen beforehand. Same information, reading by printed book doesn't produce any of those adverse effects. The other advantage of a printed book, there's multiple advantages of printed books, and that's why they're not going out of style. People thought by this time printed books would be relegated to, before Christ historical items. But it's not going to do that, because printed books, just touching them, underlining them, being able to write comments, it's a lot easier. I know they try to simulate that in some online type of book aspects of things, but it's not near as convenient as actually having the printed book. And so in general, printed books also allow you focused time as well. If you're on the screen reading a printed book, chances are you might get distracted as well when you're reading an online book. But a printed book, you're much less to get distracted. It's normally quiet in your room, and you're able to really focus. So if at all possible, get the printed version and take advantage of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for Dr. Nedley for a fantastic presentation, and for all the presentation this week. Everybody has been immensely blessed. So at the end of this whole series, I also would like to thank Sharon and John for organizing Dr. Nedley to come here with his team, with Erica and Christina. Thank you so much for coming to Ireland. We hope you enjoyed here the nature, as well as all the meetings. And we hope to see you again soon. So we'll plan something in the future. So at the end of this meeting, I would just like us to close our eyes for a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we want to give you glory and thank you so much for all the blessings we received this whole week. And we want to, in a special way, pray for Dr. Nedley and his family as they travel around the globe, spreading your message, reminding people of the importance of physical and mental health, and how that can also enhance their relationship with you. And we pray, Lord, that we may apply the advices we heard this afternoon. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Take care and all the best, and God bless you. Thank you.